Okay, hello, time for some choo-choo action via the St. Luke's 2014 Model Railway Exhibition. This train show is one of the closest train shows to where I live in Sydney, Australia. It's a great little train show, it's family friendly, it's also connected to a church. So this time around, I thought as a bit of a novelty, I'll try and get as many hand of God shots, that is where the train operator or the exhibit operator comes in with their hand to basically put a train on the tracks. And what was interesting was, the exhibitors don't like that being seen, but I said, hey, that's cool, I want to get shots like this, so hopefully I've got a few of those in this video. Also, what's curious is I forgot to pick up the fact sheet about each exhibit. I take a little bit of video of the name of the exhibit so I know what I'm looking at when I'm making the video, but I don't think that's going to tell me the scale or gauge. Maybe there's something that you can tell me. Maybe those hand of God shots will be the secret to revealing the scale. Anyway, I better stop yabbering because it's ultimately boring. There are some beautiful train exhibits at this train show this year, and we might go with the raw sound. Hey, I hope you enjoy the video. Oh yeah, this is a very interesting layout for me because these are the sort of trains I used to catch to go to school back in the 70s. I used to catch the train between Chatswood on Sydney's North Shore down to Milson's Point. That's where my school was. The school was down on the harbour shore there. And these trains was what I was catching. They had a distinctive smell to them. They had a distinctive sound. The red ones, we called them red rattlers because they had these rattly windows that you could like latch it right up and you could hang out the train if you're a very naughty boy. But the very fond memory I've got when I saw this, and some of these trains had their doors open, was the fact that the doors were manual. And as school children, we used to stand inside and politely open and close the doors for people because that was the fun of being on the train. The other thing I remember was there were these areas on the floor. You could actually lift up the area on the floor and you could look down to the wheels and bogies moving as the train went along, as naughty as that was, but that's what school children do, I can assure you. Another very fond memory I've got of these styles of trains was going to school. You'd knock on the driver's cab, hey, can we come in for a ride? Sometimes the driver would let you in, and of course you want to ask about where's the horn and what does that lever do. But by the time the train was moving, you were mesmerised by looking at the tracks going by and getting the point of view as a driver. That was the fun. It's interesting, I sort of remember the drivers used to stand up driving these trains. I don't remember them sitting down for some reason. Maybe someone who knows about this can answer that. And the other thing that used to go on was when the trains were packed full and overflowing, the drivers used to open up the cabin area, the front cab, and some overflow people could go in there just to basically squeeze more people in. But I can assure you it was different times back then. That would never happen these days under the way the drivers' cabs are so secure. The trains today are so sanitised in a sense versus what I used to ride on when I was a kid. These things had character, these things were like animals, these things were great trains. It's sad, I rarely ever see a red rattler out and about, apart from maybe some of the service vehicles that Sydney Rail has. But boy oh boy oh boy, they are a fairly rare item. This exhibit here was beautifully done. Historically it looked fantastic. I gave it 10 out of 10. I was impressed. And Gloria was impressed as well. Ooh, I've seen this tram display before. I think it was last year. Do you know the scale of this one? Can you tell? It's pretty hard to tell unless you see like a hand come in. Well, I know from my previous notes that this is N scale, and the person who was behind this one is a gentleman called Ian Williamson. And this time around, this display was in more natural light, so to me, it looked, well, more natural. Ooh, this is a lovely model of a steam locomotive, 3830, which I think was built just after the Second World War. I've read a wiki page about this, and it's a little bit disturbing for the fact that this steam engine is actually needing a new boiler. So at the moment, like the 3801, it's out of service. And my God, I just hope that the people who are looking after this thing gets this repaired in Australia and not overseas. And I'm sure we're never going to forget the botched repair done to 3801, which is still ongoing. It's a disgrace how long that steam engine has been out of service. Nevertheless, this is a beautiful model. It's large. Okay, it's the classic Meccano from the era before plastic was invented. And I can assure you the owner of this model is extremely proud of it. I haven't seen this model at St. Luke's for a couple of years. I was very pleased that it was back on show, in a prime position. Anyone who looks at this large Meccano steam engine is impressed. Ooh, I have definitely seen this layout at previous St. Luke's, and I've got a bit of a blurb from the previous years. Bridport. This mixed gauge point-to-point shunting layout represents an English scene in the year 1890. That's a long time ago. The principal railway is the standard gauge London and South Western Railway. The broad gauge Great Western Railway is also represented, so there are two gauges of railway on this model railway. There is a recorded commentary that the operator has to synchronise with the running of the display, and sometimes it gets out of sync, but hey, that's pretty cool. All the locomotives, most of the rolling stock and other structures were scratch built. That means someone spent a lot of time building this up from nothing. It wasn't bought off the shelf. This layout took a year to build, and some of the rolling stock is over 50 years old, and I sort of know how old that feels. So apart from depicting some vintage steam engines and things from a bygone era, parts of this model railway are actually vintage in themselves, and that's sort of cool.
The lifting bridge can be raised, and the level crossing gates, the turntable round. Easy on which to simulate the stone. This is done by burning the individual stone. Just short of the lifting bridge. This locomotive does not necessarily need turning, but as this locomotive will go and collect the horse boxes, stabled in their special siding. 18th century, this
Ooh, these trains look very different. That's because these trains are not from Australia, they're from the USA. So when I look at this, it looks all foreign to me. But if you're from the western side of the USA, maybe Idaho or Oregon, does this look familiar to you? I need to know.
No. It's obviously a matchbox car, but it's like...
Well, those are two versions. You get them different names. Yeah. The engine, very cheap.
Ooh, JB Mining. This is one very, very impressive small-scale model railway. There's that saying of mine, the devil's in the detail. This is absolutely oozing with that. It's one of those layouts that you just can spend so much time looking at. And I noticed when people were watching this, they were spending a lot of time analysing what was going on. And the fact that the person who was driving this exhibition was doing all sorts of different things as well. That's what makes it interesting. I would hate to think of how many hours have gone into making this very, very impressive small-scale model railway. What made this one very interesting, and it always does with model railways, is there was mountains in this as well. So apart from having your shunting area and, a track that just goes round, there's also other areas where there's elevation and the trains can go to other places. There was definitely two sides to this exhibition. There was the busy side, and then there was the other side where the trains would run around in between the mountains. I'd have to say, of the small-scale exhibitions that were at St Luke's, this one was the best. And overall, it's one of the best of the smaller-scale exhibitions that I've ever seen. And up at the end shot, whenever we get to it, you'll see that this layout overall is very small, and that's amazing. I mean, this whole layout was just utterly amazing.
The insulation foam they use on stuff.
Oh, here's our final end shot, and hopefully you can start to see just how tiny overall this layout is. It's completely amazing. It will blow your mind if ever you see this in real life. This next layout is like the cement between the bricks at St Luke's. It's there every year. It's called Penguin's Halt, and it's a U-drive layout where you have command of the train. And what's interesting about this one is that it's got those Lionel circus vans that have the giraffes that pull their heads in just in time before they get smacked by the tunnel. In previous years, people have told me those Lionel wagons are actually fairly collectible, and these ones looked in particularly good condition. And right next to Penguin's Halt was a layout called Audreyville. Maybe that has a connection back to the original creator of Thomas and Friends, and it had a very curious custom version of Henry, who was travelling around the layout at an extreme speed. And another constant at St Luke's is a display of the Tommy Thomas Big Loader style sets. Anyone who's half interested in collecting Thomas and Friends merchandise would see these toys as a fairly sought after item. But be very careful, there are some very, very clever clone knockoff versions of these toys which will never give you the same sort of satisfaction as the real McCoy Tommy toys. The next layout is called Pangbourne Ridge, and from reading the notes from the previous years when I've seen this display, it's a small make-believe logging operation set at the diesel to steam transition era. The buildings and the scenery are all scratch built, and it's one of those layouts that you look at and it just looks luscious. It's also a curious gauge. I know what the gauge is because I looked at the notes from the previous years. I wonder if you know what gauge this layout is. Might be a nice little test for all those people who think they know their model railway gauges. Well, this next exhibit was exhibit number 16 plus a can of Coke, but luckily I worked out its name. It's called Apple Tree Vale. And maybe this is a perfect lesson that sometimes it's all about what's riding on the tracks. If you haven't got a very impressive layout to show people, sometimes putting something on the tracks, which is half interesting and different to other layouts, is a key to success. You'd be surprised how many people have an interest in trams versus trains. And the funny thing about model railway exhibitions is quite often the trams are like the forgotten sisters. I could have easily left this small layout off this video, but because we've got 2 trams running around, I think it deserves a place, and I know there are the tram fans out there, so enjoy it while you can. At St Luke's Model Railway Club, they have a layout called Defty, which is a shared modular layout, basically built on tables and can be put together into a very large model railway layout, and this provides the perfect platform and long layout to run the Hornby live steam trains. These very specialised steam trains can be identified by the green light you can see inside the cab, and for the simple fact that they are blowing off steam and they look like steam engines when they're actually running. But be warned, these Hornby live steam model trains are very specialised. You just can't pick them up out of their box and slap them on any railway and think you're going to get it up and running. It takes a fair bit of nous, a different voltage, and a lot of time and patience to understand how to run these trains. There'll always be a divide in the model railway community. Those who have gone and purchased one of these sets and they have failed to understand how to run them, you'll see lots of comments from these people on forums and boards, how they denounce the whole system. Then there are the others who have set up the correct sort of layout and spent the time to understand how all this works. And you'll always hear amazing reports from them about how much enjoyment this different style of model railway brings. It's very interesting to look at the prices on eBay of these sets. Be very careful of ones that people have already tinkered with. Quite often these people haven't understood how to work these and they've broken these sets and they're trying to on-sell them. Always try and pick off the ones which are mint in box and have not been played with. And it's those sets that are starting to command big prices on eBay. I'll classify this Hornby live steam as niche. It's very nice and it's very collectible. I'll give it top marks if you're looking for something to slap under the bed as a future investment.
They had, in America, they had three drivers on, they had triplexes. Yeah. But they couldn't get the steam to work. They couldn't get the steam next to drivers. Yeah. And the gearing had to continue.
The Virginian and the North area.
Triplexes.
I hope I've got this right. I think this Thomas layout was from Kids Power. These are people connected to the North Shore Railway Modelers Association. And sadly, this is a little bit tricky to video because this display was like in a Perspex box. Makes it very hard to get nice video shots. I'm sorry, Thomas fans. The next display, it's called Bushtown. And I didn't know much about this until I typed in Bushtown model trains, and up came a PDF related back to the 2014 St Luke's exhibition, which is the one we're making the video about now. This display is from the Georges River Model Railway Club. It's a beautiful display. I get very impressed when I see small scale done well, and what I like about small scale is you get a lot of bang for buck in real estate terms. There's a lot of trains here, there's a lot of track, and it doesn't take up much real estate. It was also nice that Bushtown was two-sided for the fact that you could walk completely around this layout and enjoy two different scenes. What was curious about Bushtown was I was very late to St Luke's this year. I came there about an hour before it closed on Sunday, and this display was playing up. There was some hesitation going on, the trains were stopping on the points, and it's a reminder to all of us that these model exhibitions don't just get set up and you turn the trains on and around they go. They need to be maintained and looked after and cleaned as the exhibit gets exhibited. For the fact that Bushtown was playing up a bit in this last hour of exhibition gave me plenty of hand of God shots, and I needed those to make this year's video a little bit different.
You know, that needs a touch. Oh, the funnel? Yeah. One was a funnel itself and the other was...
What I liked about Bushtown was the way they had some scenery set in the foreground. So in photography terms, I can actually get shots which look like real life. I can get in and shoot between trees and have things in the foreground, the train in the midground, and there's background as well. Boy, it was just a joy to put my video camera over this very, very impressive layout. Congratulations to those behind Bushtown.
By warming up.
This next train exhibit, it's called Half Pint Creek. It's made by Chris Fraser. It was very impressive. It's only a new display. I had a chat to Chris and he detailed to me that it wasn't that old. And what was very nice was he gave the trains a run even though we were sort of into packing up time. Like I said before, I was actually very late to get to St Luke's this year. Half Pint Creek is a little bit like the Zigzag Railway. It's sort of like point-to-point shunting style railway, but it packs some serious punch. It's actually a large scale. It's much, much larger than that previous display Bushtown, but because of its zigzag layout style, it doesn't take up too much real estate. I better stop talking because you need to hear the real sounds that were emanating from this very impressive display that won the Best Scenery Award. Let's have a reminisce about one of the displays we saw earlier in this video. That was Electric Car Shed, and by looking at the PDF related to St Luke's display, I found out that it was the winner of the most entertaining layout. Now what's curious here is that this display had the biggest emotional effect for me because it reminded me a lot of travelling by train when I was a child in Sydney. And the key to success with many things when you're trying to impress someone is to push emotional buttons and triggers. This layout certainly pushed those buttons on me. What would be very curious to do would be to pick up this layout and take it, let's say, to the UK or the USA, land it over there at some train shows, and people would look at this and they'd say, what's this? Some mixed up, messed up railroad of, different colours and different styles? Well, that's what Sydney Trains was like back in the 70s. It was a real messed up affair. And that really hasn't changed today. If you come to Sydney, you'll see all different styles of trains running around on the same network. And from what we're being told, we'll be going back to the future and going back to single-decker trains, because that apparently carries more people than double-deckers. I still haven't been able to work that one out. Mind you, I think a big part of that decision was the fact that cutting tunnels for single-decker trains is far, far cheaper than having to cut the larger tunnels that double-deckers need. But hey, let's not get too close to the truth about why we're going back to the future on Sydney trains.
Sorry? Yeah, the big one is. You could have it.
And if you're wondering which of the layouts impressed me the most, well, it's pretty easy for me to tell you that. It was JB Mining, and the gentleman behind that is called John Bell, because I found the PDF about St Luke's online finally. Well, I hope you enjoyed looking around the 28th St Luke's Model Railway exhibition. I'm sorry that I couldn't see all of the exhibitions at this year's one. I got there very late this year, but I hope I presented St Luke's exhibition in a very positive and uplifting way, because we need St Luke's 29th and 30th exhibitions to be really, really big. Okay, thanks for watching, and bye for now.